We welcome all who seek the meaning of life and who believe that human spirituality is wider than any one tradition and deeper than any one set of opinions. With a respect for our Christian origins, we seek to explore all truths from all sources. Our fellowship gives us strength and encouragement in daily living. We light this chalice in fellowship, in love, laughter, and praise, drawing from it inspiration and hope, strength for the days to come. Some opening words by Janet Eldred, who's one of our members at York. We come together to celebrate life, to give thanks, to rejoice in all that is good. We come also to speak against injustice, to share our sorrows, to voice our despair. We come to worship because God is present in all these things. Let us ponder mystery and let us be one with God. We're very lucky at York because after he retired from his ministry in Edinburgh, Andrew Hill and Margaret, his wife, moved down to York. So we have them regularly at chapel with us. So, and I do love his hymns, so that's a beautiful one there. Now, our first reading is two readings by this lady here. It's somebody called, well, she doesn't call herself a lady, sorry, Teresa Isoto. She's a Unitarian Universalist minister and activist. They have enjoyed interim ministry and chaplaincy with veterans. They are married to the Reverend Sean Parker Dennison. Reverend Soto is a settled lead minister at the First Unitarian Church of Oakland, has joined the community with much hope and joy. So that's Reverend Teresa Soto. I always enjoyed buying the Unitarian Universalist sort of meditation. Well, that's what they were always known as, meditation manuals or booklets. They now have a different name. They're now called the In Spirit. But I've chosen two reading stroke meditation stroke, what do we want to call them, from this book for today's service. So picked up at the GA. Eventually. When they are kids, it seems like a profession, talking to rocks and listening for their beauty. For the song that says that they belong together, they pick up the shiny one. This is a bit of anthrax, I've forgotten. Same group as carbon, but one further down. The oval, egg-shaped one. This actually came from Bangladesh. I pick up rocks from all over. The flat one. I think this came from one of the coasts, but I can't remember. Somebody might have given it to me, that's a possibility. But I've had it a long time. I'm allowed to forget where it came from. And the pretty ones. So you can look at them later. One from Castleton. So that's a piece of Blue John that I possibly bought in a shop, or maybe, I don't remember. But this, I sort of picked them up from caves or off the rock side or anywhere and everywhere. I think you're not allowed to now, but I got it when nobody was watching you. They store them in boxes, in bags, in pockets. These are all stored in various places at home. Don't worry, they're very clean after being laundered. I haven't actually put them through the washing machine, but I put other things through the washing machine by error. But what you will miss, unless you pay attention, is this. There is always the possibility that we can treasure what is in our pockets rather than the thing we have yet to attain. There is a knowledge of the earth beneath all of us that a plain, sparkly rock can give. It is the hurtling round rock on which we race around the universe. There is the sense of beauty all around, but also choosing to experience it, to seize it and savor it. You could do worse than a practical, ongoing yes. This community will not begrudge you any reminder of your individual, our shared strength. Carry it with you everywhere. Be ready to share it. You know where you can get more. So, you might like to look at some of them after the service. So I'll leave them just there. So, now join together in prayer, please. And it's a prayer called Perplexed by another American Unitarian Universalist. Let us fill ourselves with the sorrow and the fear of the danger we all face, and our clear failure to face it. Each of us alone will have to come to terms with whatever it brings. No, not so much alone as all together. And it seems that not many admit to seeing it straight on, grope about to start anew and look for new ways. Even trying to find another way, there is so much of bread and circus we expect to be entertained. And how can we really be clear? Perhaps the incessant reading and thinking are part of that inability to be clear. There's a woman who lives near here who is going to be taking food to an Indian reservation this winter in a truck. Could it be that simple? Yes, definitely. It is important to begin. No, certainly not. It is important to have an idea of the larger scheme of things. Think, analyze, but soon you must act. Do it, then move on. The earth may be saved for human habitation or not, but what will you do? Quite a thought-provoking prayer. What will you do? Amen. I chose that hymn, mainly, I suppose, because it was on the CD, one of the CDs you've got. That's always a constraining factor. But I felt the idea of beautiful, the idea of ceaselessly forming, maker of rainbows, those sort of ideas of beauty, but also the ideas of fear and uncertainty and chaos somehow fitted partly with the rocks I brought in that I've put there for the last reading, but also some of the ideas of ghosts that I might be introducing later. So that's why I chose that hymn. Now, this first reading, is one that I picked up when I was visiting my friend just after Christmas in Lincolnshire. And I just thought, wow, when I read her Grain of Thought magazine. So that fits in perfectly to my ideas that I was developing. Yes, can I have a copy, please? So she actually cut it out of the magazine for me, so it made it even easier. It's called Do You Believe in Ghosts? is from the Grainthorpe News in December 2022. Do you live in an old house? Do strange and weird things happen? I, together with my family, do. In late October, so this is last October, I decided that the garden could do with a tidy up. There were leaves and weeds everywhere. After another cup of coffee, I gathered up the courage to venture out. Deciding to start with the leaves, which were soon consigned to the green bin, now for the weeds. Armed with my spade, I started to dig. After a short while, as I dug, there was a loud metallic clink, and then another clunk. I began to investigate, and to my surprise, I unearthed a cobbler's last. That's a heavy metal foot shape for holding a shoe whilst it was repaired. As the last was covered in soil and rust, I decided to clean it under the garden tap. Once it was washed and dried, I brought it into the house and thought it would make a good doorstop. My new doorstop was placed in the snug, as that particular door always swung open. It worked well. A few days later, I noticed that it had moved. No one admitted to moving it, but it was now propping open the door to the hall. This became a regular occurrence. I would move it. When I looked again, it was back in the hall. Christmas was almost upon us, and one dark afternoon I was reading downstairs when I heard the soft padding of feet and the swish of skirts coming quietly down the staircase. To my horror, the door opened and a woman walked through, passing me without a glance, straight into the hall. Suddenly, it was cold and much darker in the room. As I got up from my chair, I heard a bumping coming from upstairs, then the cry of a baby. I went to the bottom of the stairs, and my view was blocked by a door which shouldn't have been there. The door was originally in this position, at the top of the stairs, many years ago. I rushed up the stairs. As I approached the door, the sounds became louder. I opened the latch and glanced in. There, in front of my eyes, was a small girl rocking a wooden cradle with a new baby inside. The room was lit by a candle, but as I stepped inside, the vision vanished. I could now hear a tapping noise coming from the direction of the hall. I turned and ran down the darkened stairs, through the snug, until I reached the hall. This large room was no longer our hall, but, as it had been in the past, a shoe repairer's shop. There were a couple, a man and a woman, bending over a workbench with two cobbler's lasts repairing boots. I glanced to my right, and to my amazement, there with them was the young girl holding the baby whom I'd seen moments earlier. Looking at them through modern eyes, I wondered what this scene from the past meant. Hard work, long hours in this cold, inhospitable room. Watching them, I then heard a rattle from the door on Buttgate, part of Grainthorpe. The little girl stretched up and opened the door. Cold air blew in, together with the joyous sound of carol singers, and, just up the hill behind them, I could see the chapel lit with candles. I looked around the room again. In the corner by the door was a basket of small wooden handmade toys, which, with much glee and enjoyment, was handed to the singers. These, despite the long hours the family worked, had been carefully and happily made for the children of the village. I stepped forward, and the whole scene of yesteryear disappeared. No workers, no candles, no singers. The coldness of the house turned to warmth, and I was left alone with my thoughts. The last still moves of its own accord, back to where it belongs. There are still strange bangs and noises, perhaps even a voice or two. The house has a lovely, warm and happy feel to it, and these people are just part of its long history. They are most welcome. On reflection, where is the other last? Maybe you'll find it next time he's digging in the garden. So, Diana's going to read the next reading, which she recognised, I believe. You might like to tell people how you recognised it, where from.
It's simply that I've heard of Rilke before, and I probably will have read this one before, and it's just very pretty. So this is Be Patient by Rainer Maria Rilke. Be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart. Try to love the questions themselves. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answers. This was taken from Nikki Jenkins' service on the 12th of March.
If I was asked if I believed in ghosts, I'm not sure whether I would answer yes or no. I think that I would possibly answer, I don't know. I volunteer as a guide at the National Trust property, Treasurer's House in York. This is a house that is special to the Trust for a number of reasons. It was the first house given to the Trust with its contents back in 1930 by its then owner, a very wealthy Mr. Frank Green. Back in 1897, Mr. Green had bought 3 of the 5 dwellings that occupied the site opposite the Minster, and had spent the next 33 years and a lot of money converting the 3 dwellings back into one, with the remaining 2 dwellings becoming what is now known as the Gray's Court Hotel. It's quite an expensive boutique hotel as well. Mr. Green was a single gentleman with no children, but a great interest in history and in the importance of maintaining old buildings for future generations. During his ownership, he changed the contents and arrangements of the rooms several times, with different rooms dressed to showcase different periods of history. For example, the Great Hall now looks medieval. It was organised, built, changed during his ownership. It was not medieval and never had been, but it looks medieval. And the blue drawing room looks Georgian. I'm not quite sure what other periods the other rooms are meant to showcase, but those 2 are very definite. He also put small studs around the feet of pieces of furniture so that staff and the National Trust workers and volunteers knew where he felt pieces of furniture went. A few years after he'd given the house to the Trust, he returned for a visit and was very angry to discover that furniture had been moved. He demanded that pieces should be returned to their rightful places and told the Trust officials that if furniture was moved again, then he would, these are his words, haunt them. I will haunt you to your dying day, was what he said to the people that he was talking to. These were Trust officials that had shown him round. So I will haunt you to your dying day if you move anything. Things have been moved. Quite a few, some pieces of furniture have perhaps been broken. Some may become too weak to leave anywhere where somebody might touch them by mistake. I don't know, but things have been moved. And the Treasurer's House is now one of the most haunted houses in York. And yes, Mr. Frank Green is one of the ghosts. There are a number of others. I've never considered myself as a particularly sensitive person, but I have experienced unusual occurrences in Treasurer's House that I must call ghostly. A few years ago, before COVID, the house was opened for Halloween with a professional actress hired to take the tours round the house. She acted as if she became more and more affected by unseen ghosts as the tour progressed. So there are quite a lot of ghost stories. So she wasn't telling people about the history of the house and the history of the furniture or anything like that. It was purely a ghost tour. Different volunteers were on duty with torches to direct the people on the tours round pieces of furniture. We didn't want anybody banging into something and damaging them, so the rooms were in dark and torches just to direct them where they should walk. And then once they were in a room, she would then speak to them about the ghost stories for that particular room. I was in the tapestry room, which is the most haunted room in the house. And when I show people around the house, I tell them where I was standing and then tell them what I became aware of. I did not see a ghost, but between tours, when I was in the room, completely alone, in the dark, because I wasn't wasting my torch battery, was I suddenly smelt cigar smoke. Now, I recognised the smell instantly because my father used to smoke cigars, and I've always rather liked the smell of a cigar being smoked. I've never smoked a cigarette myself. I don't smoke. I never wanted to, but I do like the smell of a cigar. So no one else was there at all. I actually went to the window and said, "Is the window open?" But of course it was cold. So we don't open the windows in that room very often anyhow. So the smell wasn't coming from the window, it was coming from the room itself. I am certain that it was Frank Green, previous owner, checking on me, either to make sure that I wasn't moving anything, or I like to think he was actually checking that I was all right in the dark in his old house. The smell was there for maybe just maybe a minute, maybe two. I can't remember the time. I just remember smelling it, being very, very aware of what the smell was, and wondering, sort of recognizing it as cigar smoke. When I first started volunteering there at Treasurer's House, I'd often smelt a potpourri type smell in that room, and just thought that permanent staff had sprayed the room as a room freshener before the tour started. I found out some months later that they hadn't. And other people have also smelt lavender or other sort of herbal smells in that room. In particular, there was a leak from the roof one time, and rain started to come in a corner near some 1600s, 17th century tapestries, and so the staff were taking them down, and said as they took one of the tapestries down, there was a really strong smell of lavender. I wasn't involved in that, so I don't know about that. In my years at Treasurer's House, there have been many sightings of different figures, including a terrier-type dog, and that was running around the blue drawing room, and a grey lady who was sitting in a chair in the blue drawing room, and actually the girl who told me said she'd seen her sitting on the stairs later on her tour. So, the most famous sighting, more recently, a woman dressed in servant's clothing was seen going through a wall where there used to be a staircase. And then the most famous sighting was when a plumber back in 1953, working in one of the cellar rooms, saw a platoon of Roman soldiers walking at knee depth across the room. Heard about that one? Yes. That's the one that's seen, sort of heard about most of online or wherever. And subsequent excavation found that they had been marching on the Roman road, which was below the cellar floor. I've never felt threatened in the house, and I volunteer there most Mondays. So I think that if there are ghosts, and if they're aware of me, which of course we don't know, then they must be friendly. So, do I believe in ghosts? I still don't know. I do know that I smell cigar smoke. And I do believe the visitors who told me that they'd seen someone, I believe that they had no reason to lie to me. One was a lady who just told her husband that she'd seen a dog in the room. Thought, there can't be a dog in the dogs aren't allowed in the house. And then she looked to see where she'd seen the dog, and it had gone. And the sighting of the lady in the grey dress, in the blue dress, that was I forgot which colour it was. That was a girl, teenage girl, who told her mother, not me, and then her mother told me. I can very easily waste too much time online. It's a modern hobby, I think it seems to be. But I decided I would look online. The first story that I found was a story about the Roman soldiers, which I've already told to you. I already knew that story. One believable ghost story, not related to Treasure's house, that I found was of a young child seeing his grandfather enter the kitchen, and how the grandfather told the child not to worry, that he had died and was with his wife, the child's late grandmother, and how it was going to snow later in the afternoon. He then told the boy to go and tell his mother, who was in the next room, not to be frightened, but that a policeman would soon be knocking on the front door to tell her that her father had died. This happened. It did snow, but because of what the child had told his mother, the family could accept the news. They knew that Grandad was happy with his beloved wife. Now that was that's not quite word for what I read, because unfortunately I read it and then turned over the pages, and on the internet it's hard to go back sometimes, so I couldn't find the exact words, but that was the gist of what I read. I think that there must be aspects of our world that are hidden to most of us. I personally don't believe that I will enter an afterlife where I will meet my parents or grandparents, but it would be lovely if I did. Do I believe in ghosts? I don't know, but I do believe that there is more to this world than we know, and that we should all be prepared to listen, at least try to understand another person's point of view. It isn't that long ago that people believed that the earth was flat, or that the sun circled the earth, because we all knew that our world was the centre of the universe. Since writing this talk, I was helping at the Alternative Wedding Fair, which we held recently at our York Unitarian Church. I started talking to Reverend Stephanie's father about this service. I think it was the week before I took it in York, and ghosts. And it is a small world. I didn't know this until I started talking to him, but it turned out that he, with a colleague, had been involved in research into ghosts and ghostly occurrences. He told me how there was a house where there was regularly the sound of footsteps walking along an upstairs hallway, but nobody was ever seen. He and his colleagues recorded the footsteps, both from the hallway and from the room below, where they could hear them as well. They then played the recordings through an oscilloscope. They were able to work out the type of footwear worn, which was old, and that the recording from downstairs allowed just the correct amount of time for the sound to pass through the floor and the ceiling to the downstairs room. But in this instant, there was no scientific explanation for the ghostly occurrence. Reverend Stephanie's father then went on to tell me that there were scientific explanations for most of the ghostly events that they had studied. He then started to tell me possible explanations for the cigar smoke smells that I had smelt at Treasurer's house. I'm afraid that I decided that the cigar smell could not have been due to temperature changes in the room, but must have been due to Mr. Frank Green checking on me. So now my answer to my question must change to, yes, I do believe in the possibility of ghostly experiences. I'm not saying I believe in ghosts, but I do believe in the possibility of ghostly experiences. May all of you make your own minds up about whether you believe in ghosts or not. Amen. Short meditation. From wilderness to community, from solitude to company, we return. These are the poles of our existence. May we fear neither ourselves nor each other, and may what we learn in our aloneness deepen our sense of being at one with our neighbour, with our own true selves, and so with the divine root of being which we share. So the divine root of being which we share. Now, the benediction is from Reverend Soto again. This book hasn't been used enough. It's not staying open very well. So this is a charm for hope. The first thing to do is tie a string around your finger. So whichever way you can do it. Remember that you are not alone. Think of the ways that our best shared futures are braided inextricably with your own present and your destiny. The second thing is to untie the string and let the knots and tightness fall away. Let the burden of bleakness roll off your sore shoulders. Resistance on these opaque horizons only requires one source of strength, one ray of light. Remember that persistence doesn't require all the answers up front, only one. Fortunately for all of us, we have one response: to remain together through awkward times and happy ones. We remember and we find our resolve in one another. Amen. Quite an appropriate reading of the meditation after what Louise just said about the sale finally going through. So may you support each other in these times of change.